The mining drill screamed against solid rock as sweat poured down Ryan's face, mixing dirt and exhaustion into muddy streaks across his cheeks. 47 hours of continuous work without rest. All because the hegemony supervisor decided human quotas needed to increase by 30% overnight. His hands shook from fatigue as he guided the massive extraction equipment through another vein of rare minerals, the kind that powered Council starships and made their energy weapons possible. While humans received barely enough food credits to survive another day of backbreaking labor behind him, Maria collapsed against the tunnel wall, her breathing ragged and desperate. She had been working these same mines for 6 years, ever since the Council decided that Kepler 186f would be strip-mined for its resources, forcing every human colonist into mandatory labor contracts with no end date. "Get up," barked the mechanical voice of Overseer Unit 7, its metallic form hovering near the tunnel entrance with sensors that monitored every human movement, counting productivity and punishing inefficiency with reduced rations or extended work shifts that could last for days. Ryan helped Maria to her feet, knowing that showing compassion was considered a waste of productive time by their alien supervisors, but unable to ignore the basic human decency that the Council viewed as a weakness rather than a strength worth respecting. The communication device on his wrist buzzed with an incoming message from Earth's United Defense Command, a signal that shouldn't have been possible to receive this deep underground, unless someone had found a way to bypass the Council's monitoring systems entirely. Admiral Roberts appeared as a flickering hologram, her image distorted by interference but her voice clear and determined. All human workers across the galaxy are to receive this message simultaneously. The Centauri mining disaster has claimed 47 lives because our people dared to question unsafe working conditions. Ryan's blood turned cold as he recognized the names being read aloud. Friends and colleagues who had been working similar extraction operations on distant worlds. People who had families and dreams beyond the endless cycle of labor that the Council had trapped them in. Marcus Thompson, age 34, died when structural supports failed after he reported dangerous gas leaks. Sandra Williams, age 28, killed in an equipment malfunction that could have been prevented with basic safety protocols. David Chen, age 41, crushed when alien supervisors ordered him to work in an unstable tunnel section. Maria gripped Ryan's arm as the full horror of the situation became clear. These weren't accidents or unfortunate mishaps, but deliberate murders committed by alien overseers who viewed human lives as completely expendable in pursuit of higher production numbers. "The time for patience has ended," Admiral Roberts continued, her voice carrying 2 centuries of suppressed anger and frustration. "For too long we have followed Council regulations, hoping that compliance would eventually earn us basic rights and dignity as sentient beings deserving of respect." Around the mining complex, other workers were receiving the same transmission on hidden communication devices that had been smuggled into human settlements over the course of many months. Part of a coordination effort that the Council had never suspected was possible. We tried diplomacy and received contempt. We offered cooperation and received exploitation. We demonstrated our value as partners and received treatment as slaves who should be grateful for the privilege of serving superior alien civilizations. The mechanical overseer's sensors began detecting unusual electromagnetic signatures as more hidden transmitters activated throughout the facility, but its programming couldn't identify the source of the interference or understand that every human worker was receiving classified military communications. "Today we begin Protocol 7, full military mobilization across all human colonies and settlements. If the Council wants to treat us as expendable resources, they are about to discover why Earth never achieved planetary unity until we encountered alien civilizations." Ryan felt something change in his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced since childhood, hope mixed with righteous anger, the knowledge that finally, after decades of abuse and exploitation, humanity was going to fight back against their oppressors with everything they had. "We are very good at war," Admiral Roberts concluded, "and we have been preparing for this moment since the first human colony was forced into involuntary servitude. Hidden weapons caches, concealed military installations, and trained personnel disguised as ordinary workers are positioned throughout Council space, The hologram flickered and disappeared, leaving Ryan and Maria alone with Overseer Unit 7, whose mechanical sensors were still trying to identify the source of the transmission that shouldn't have been possible to receive or decode. Maria looked at Ryan with the expression that combined fear and determination in equal measure. "What do we do now?" she whispered, knowing that their lives had just changed forever, that there could be no going back to the illusion of peaceful coexistence with aliens who saw them as nothing more than useful tools. Ryan reached into his work jacket and pulled out a device that looked like a standard mining scanner, but had been modified with components smuggled from Earth over the course of several years. Its true purpose was to disable alien technology by emitting targeted electromagnetic pulses. "Now we stop playing." "Nice," he said quietly, activating the device and watching with grim satisfaction as Overseer Unit 7's systems began to malfunction and shut down, its mechanical voice cutting off mid-sentence as circuits overloaded and processors failed. Throughout the mining complex, similar scenes were playing out as human workers revealed hidden weapons and began systematically disabling Council surveillance equipment, communication arrays, and automated security systems that had kept them trapped in servitude. The Galactic War had begun, not with massive fleet engagements or dramatic space battles, but with ordinary people deciding they had endured enough abuse and were willing to risk everything for the chance to live as free beings rather than property. Ryan helped Maria gather other workers as alarms began sounding throughout the facility. Knowing that within hours Council military forces would respond to the uprising, but also knowing that humanity had spent 2 centuries preparing for this exact moment. The mining drill that had been screaming against solid rock just minutes earlier now sat silent and abandoned, its purpose transformed from extracting wealth for alien masters to serving as the first symbol of human resistance against galactic oppression that would spread like wildfire across the stars. Deep space rippled with invisible distortions as the human vessel, Ghostwalker, moved through the void between stars, its hull coating absorbing electromagnetic radiation instead of reflecting it back to alien sensor arrays that swept the area. Searching for signs of rebellion, Lieutenant Foster watched his navigation displays with practiced calm, knowing that the Council's most advanced detection systems couldn't identify his ship because they were designed to locate vessels using energy signatures rather than the passive stealth technology that humans had perfected during their nuclear age. The metamaterial hull plating had been developed by Earth scientists who understood that sometimes the best way to hide was to become genuinely invisible rather than relying on energy fields that could be detected by sufficiently sensitive equipment or new scanning technologies around him. His crew worked in silent efficiency, their movements coordinated through hand signals and written notes rather than verbal communication that might be intercepted by Council listening devices or translated by alien intelligence systems. "Target acquired," whispered Sergeant Kim as she activated the weapon systems that appeared on official records as mining equipment, but had been specifically designed to penetrate alien defenses using kinetic projectiles rather than energy beams that could be deflected or absorbed. The Hegemony communication relay station hung in orbit around the gas giant like a metallic spiderweb, its antenna arrays and signal boosters maintaining contact between Council military forces across 17 star systems, coordinating their response to human uprisings. Foster had studied the technical specifications of the station during his training on Earth, learning that its designers had focused on protecting against energy weapons and cyber attacks, while ignoring the possibility of physical projectiles delivered at high velocity. His ship's railguns fired clusters of microscopic projectiles that looked like metallic dust but were actually sophisticated nanomachines powered by ambient cosmic radiation and programmed with instructions that would activate once they made contact with alien technology. The nanites spread through the station's systems like an infection, not destroying anything immediately, but instead introducing subtle malfunctions that would appear to be routine equipment failures to Council technicians who had never encountered this type of warfare. Each nanomachine was smaller than a grain of sand, but contained enough processing power to analyze alien computer systems and identify critical vulnerabilities, then exploit those weaknesses in ways that would be almost impossible to detect or prevent within the station's central processing core. Communication protocols began experiencing random delays of just a few milliseconds, too small to notice during normal operations, but enough to gradually degrade the coordination between Council fleets throughout the sector. Data packets carrying military orders were corrupted by single-bit changes that altered coordinates and timing information in ways that looked like transmission errors rather than deliberate sabotage, causing confusion and miscommunication among alien commanders. Back on New Geneva Colony World, construction worker Pete received a coded message hidden within routine supply manifests, informing him that the general uprising had begun, and it was time to reveal the true purpose of the infrastructure projects that humans had been building for decades. The civilian shelter beneath the colony's main settlement opened like a flower as hidden panels slid away, revealing weapon stockpiles and military equipment that had been disguised as construction materials and stored in facilities that Council inspectors had dismissed as primitive fallout shelters. Pete and his team had spent years preparing for this moment, knowing that when humanity finally decided to fight back, they would need every advantage they could create through patience, planning, and the kind of long-term thinking that alien civilizations had never associated with their supposedly primitive species. The mining laser that he had been using to excavate foundation trenches transformed into a military-grade directed energy weapon, as safety limiters were removed and power couplings were reconfigured according to specifications that had been memorized rather than written down. Similar transformations were occurring across 73 human settlements as ordinary construction equipment, farming tools, and industrial machinery revealed their true nature as weapons of war that had been hidden in plain sight for generations. Council patrol ships began disappearing from their regular routes as human vessels emerged from asteroid fields and nebular clouds where they had been waiting motionless for months, their crews sustained by recycled air and emergency rations. The aliens had never considered that humans might be willing to endure such harsh conditions for extended periods, viewing their willingness to suffer as evidence of primitive stubbornness, rather than tactical discipline and strategic patience. Captain Rodriguez guided her converted cargo hauler through the debris field around Titan Station, her hull modifications making the ship appear to be another piece of space junk drifting between larger chunks of metal and ice. Her crew had been living in this debris field for 8 months, maintaining absolute communication silence and surviving on minimal life support, while they waited for orders to begin their attack on the Council's primary refueling depot. The station's defensive systems were designed to detect incoming missiles and energy weapons, but couldn't distinguish between actual threats and the countless pieces of debris that constantly moved through the area due to gravitational forces and stellar winds. Rodriguez activated her ship's hidden thrusters and began accelerating toward the station, her vessel's appearance unchanged, but her trajectory carefully calculated to impact the facility's main fuel storage area at maximum velocity. Her crew had already evacuated to escape pods that would be launched just before impact, continuing the human tradition of minimizing casualties among their own forces while maximizing damage to enemy infrastructure and military capabilities. The explosion that destroyed Titan Station sent shock waves through Council High Command as they realized that human tactics were fundamentally different from anything they had encountered in their centuries of galactic dominance. Admiral Roberts monitored the tactical reports from her command bunker deep beneath the Canadian Rockies, watching as human forces demonstrated capabilities that the Council had never suspected existed. Each successful operation revealed another aspect of human military doctrine that alien civilizations found impossible to understand or counter effectively. The willingness to sacrifice expensive equipment to achieve strategic objectives, the patience to wait motionless for months before striking, and the creativity to turn ordinary tools into weapons of war. The Council's initial response was predictable and ineffective, sending their conventional military forces to attack human positions that had already been evacuated or transformed into heavily defended fortresses, while the real threat came from directions they had never considered possible. Roberts smiled as she reviewed intelligence reports showing confusion and panic spreading through Council military leadership, their communications networks compromised, and their strategic coordination disrupted by nanite infections that were spreading faster than they could be identified and removed. Humanity had revealed its true capabilities at last, and the galaxy would never underestimate them again. Emergency protocols activated throughout Prime Nexus as High Counselor Vrath received casualty reports that defied everything the hegemony understood about primitive human capabilities and their supposedly inferior technology. The massive command center's holographic displays painted a picture of systematic defeat across multiple sectors, with Council fleets disappearing or being destroyed by human forces that shouldn't have possessed the firepower necessary to engage advanced alien warships. 17 complete fleet formations eliminated in 72 hours, reported intelligence. Director Korth, his crystalline features reflecting the red warning lights that bathed the chamber in an ominous glow. And we still cannot determine how these humans are coordinating their attacks across such vast distances. Around the central conference table, representatives from the 12 founding races of the Galactic Council struggled to comprehend how their centuries of technological superiority had been neutralized by a species they had dismissed as barely capable of interstellar travel. Counselor Ilex of the Spiral Coalition activated a tactical display showing the destruction of the Fourth Fleet, where human vessels had emerged from what appeared to be empty space to engage Council dreadnoughts in combat that violated every established principle of civilized warfare. They sacrificed their own ships. Ilex hissed through translated speech, his multiple eyes focusing on footage of a human cruiser ramming directly into a Council battleship. Instead of retreating when outgunned, no rational species would waste expensive military assets in such a wasteful manner. The hologram shifted to show detailed analysis of the wreckage, revealing that the human vessel had jettisoned its crew compartment just before impact, turning the remainder of the ship into a guided missile that delivered devastating kinetic energy to its target. It's not wasteful if it works, Vrath observed grimly, his mandibles clicking with agitation, as more reports arrived from field commanders who were struggling to adapt their tactics to an enemy that refused to follow conventional rules of engagement. Counselor Mex of the Unified Reaches pulled up intelligence, files on human military history, revealing patterns of warfare that the Council had ignored because they assumed such primitive conflicts had no relevance to modern galactic combat. Look at their historical records, Mex said, highlighting data about human conflicts that had raged for decades or centuries with neither side achieving decisive victory. They understand prolonged warfare in ways that our civilizations have forgotten after millennia of peace and technological dominance. The assembled Council members studied images of human cities that had been rebuilt multiple times after being destroyed by their own kind, evidence of a species that viewed war as a normal part of existence rather than an aberration to be avoided at all costs. Their industrial capacity is distributed across hundreds of worlds, noted economic analyst Zeph, as financial reports showed. The impact of human resistance on Council supply chains. They can lose entire planets and continue fighting because their manufacturing infrastructure was designed to operate independently. Unlike Council species who had centralized their production facilities for maximum efficiency and coordination, humans had deliberately maintained redundant systems across multiple locations, accepting reduced efficiency in exchange for resilience against catastrophic losses. Communication arrays throughout the command center began experiencing systematic failures as nanite infections spread through Prime Nexus itself, causing displays to flicker and data streams to become corrupted with increasing frequency. How did they get nanomachines into our most secure facility? Demanded Security Chief Roth, his synthetic form flickering between different camouflage patterns as stress affected his adaptive systems. Our screening protocols should have detected any foreign technology. Director Korth manipulated the holographic interface to show microscopic analysis of the nanites that had been recovered from infected systems, revealing construction techniques that used naturally occurring elements arranged in patterns that mimicked organic compounds. They're using carbon-based manufacturing processes that our scanners classify as biological material rather than technology. He explained, our security systems ignore them because they appear to be harmless organic debris rather than sophisticated military equipment. The nanites had been delivered through supply shipments, maintenance personnel, and even atmospheric recycling systems, spreading throughout Council infrastructure without triggering any of the defensive measures designed to protect against conventional cyber attacks or sabotage. Vrath studied tactical projections showing human fleet movements that seemed random until analyzed over longer time periods, revealing strategic coordination that suggested intelligence networks far more sophisticated than the Council had credited their enemies with possessing. "Deploy the reserve fleets," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of centuries of unopposed galactic leadership. "Activate the Titan-class battleships and prepare for full-scale military mobilization across all Council territories." The orders went out through communication networks that had been compromised by nanite infections, causing critical delays and routing errors that would scatter Council forces across multiple sectors instead of concentrating them for maximum effectiveness against human targets. As massive warships began emerging from hidden bases and orbital shipyards, human intelligence analysts monitored their movements through surveillance networks that had been established decades earlier by seemingly innocent commercial operations and cultural exchange programs. Dr. Walsh observed Council fleet dispositions from her research station on the neutral world of Haven's Rest, where she had been conducting xenobiological studies while secretly mapping alien military installations and strategic resources. Her academic credentials provided perfect cover for intelligence-gathering operations that had given humanity detailed knowledge of Council capabilities, weaknesses, and tactical doctrines that were now proving invaluable for military planning. "The reserve fleets are moving toward Sector 7, she transmitted through encoded channels hidden within routine scientific data. Estimated arrival time 47 hours. Composition includes 12 Titan-class vessels with full escort formations. Similar reports flowed in from human agents throughout Council space, revealing the locations and movements of alien military forces that had been positioned to maintain galactic order, but were now being redirected to suppress human rebellion. The Council's response was massive and overwhelming by any conventional measure, deploying enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems, but it was being coordinated through compromised networks and guided by intelligence that humans had been studying and preparing to counter for generations. Admiral Roberts reviewed the tactical situation from her bunker command center, watching as Council forces moved into positions that her strategists had predicted months earlier, based on their analysis of alien military doctrine and psychological profiles. "They're committing everything to massive frontal assaults," she observed. To her staff, exactly what we expected from civilizations that have never fought an enemy, capable of matching their technological advantages through superior tactics and strategic thinking. The stage was set for battles that would determine whether humanity could maintain its rebellion against galactic oppression or be crushed by the overwhelming military might that the Council was bringing to bear against their former slaves and servants. Orbital bombardment rained down on the fortress world of Iron Gate as Council forces attempted to break through defensive barriers that had protected the planet for over 300 years, their energy weapons creating spectacular light shows, but failing to penetrate the rotating frequency. Shield's Commander Dale watched the futile display from his converted cargo hauler New Dawn, knowing that the alien attackers were repeating the same tactical mistakes that had doomed previous rebellion attempts by other Council species who had tried to challenge hegemony authority. The fortress world's defenses operated on principles that the Council considered unbreakable, energy barriers that shifted frequency patterns to counter any known weapon system, backed up by orbital platforms that could destroy entire fleets with concentrated firepower. But humans had studied the historical records of those failed rebellions, analyzing combat footage and tactical reports to identify weaknesses that previous enemies had never recognized or exploited effectively. "The barriers are designed to counter energy weapons exclusively," Dale explained to his crew as they prepared for their assault. "But they operate on the assumption that all threats will use the same fundamental physics that Council civilizations have relied upon for millennia." His ship had been retrofitted with experimental railgun systems that used magnetic acceleration to fire solid metal projectiles at velocities approaching 30% of light speed, delivering kinetic energy that no energy barrier could deflect or absorb. The slugs were crafted from depleted uranium cores, surrounded by programmable matter that would reconfigure itself upon impact, maximizing penetration while carrying payloads of human-engineered computer viruses designed to infiltrate and subvert alien technology systems. Launch Package Alpha, Dale ordered as his weapon systems locked onto specific points in the fortress world's defensive network, targeting communication hubs and power distribution nodes rather than attempting to overwhelm the barriers through brute force. The projectiles passed through the energy shields as if they were empty space, striking their targets with nuclear-level explosive force while simultaneously releasing viral programs that began spreading through the planet's integrated defense networks. Within minutes, the fortress world's own weapons began targeting each other as infected control systems identified friendly installations as enemy threats, creating cascading failures throughout the defensive grid that had seemed impregnable just hours earlier. Similar attacks were occurring simultaneously across 47 different worlds as human forces demonstrated their mastery of unconventional warfare tactics that exploited the fundamental assumptions underlying Council military doctrine. Lieutenant Torres led her special operations team through the detention center on Binary Station, having allowed themselves to be captured during a deliberately failed reconnaissance mission that had been designed to get them inside the facility's security perimeter. Her organic neural implant activated as she was processed through the station's scanning systems, the bioengineered device mimicking human brain tissue so perfectly that even advanced alien medical scanners couldn't distinguish it from natural neural structures. Beginning data extraction, she whispered to her team members as the implant interfaced with the facility's computer networks, downloading complete blueprints, security protocols, and prisoner manifests within seconds of making contact. The Council had never considered that humans might surgically modify their own bodies to carry concealed technology, viewing such practices as barbaric mutilation rather than tactical innovation that could provide decisive advantages. Her teammates revealed hidden tools and weapons that had been grown rather than manufactured, using biological processes to create cutting implements, explosive compounds, and communication devices from their own modified cellular structures. The breakout began with simultaneous diversions across 17 different sections of the detention facility as human prisoners demonstrated coordination that shouldn't have been possible, given their individual isolation and lack of conventional communication methods. But humans had developed techniques for information transfer that relied on biological signals, chemical markers, and even quantum entanglement effects generated by modified neural tissue that alien security systems couldn't detect or prevent. Torres fought her way through automated defense systems that had been designed to contain conventional prisoners, but couldn't adapt to enemies who treated their own bodies as weapons platforms and viewed physical modification as acceptable tactical preparation. Behind her, other members of the operation planted logic bombs and viral programs throughout the facility's computer systems, ensuring that the station would continue to experience malfunctions and security breaches long after the human prisoners had escaped. The successful jailbreaks occurred across multiple sectors simultaneously, revealing that what the Council had assumed were random acts of rebellion were actually coordinated operations by specially trained human special forces who had voluntarily undergone capture intelligence reports flooded into Prime Nexus, as Council commanders realized that many of their most secure facilities had been compromised by prisoners who were actually military operatives, conducting reconnaissance and sabotage missions. "They're not fighting like a primitive species," Counselor Elex observed as he reviewed footage of human soldiers using their own bodies as weapons platforms. "They're fighting like something we've never encountered before in our centuries of galactic dominance." The Council's assumption that superior technology would guarantee victory was being systematically dismantled by human tactics that exploited every weakness in alien strategic thinking and operational procedures. Fleet engagements throughout the sector demonstrated human adaptability as they analyzed Council weapons systems during combat and developed countermeasures in real time, turning each battle into a learning experience that improved their effectiveness. Captain Murphy commanded a destroyer squadron that used swarm tactics to overwhelm Council dreadnoughts, accepting heavy casualties while gathering intelligence about alien defensive capabilities that would be transmitted to other human forces. His ships were designed with modular construction that allowed damaged vessels to transfer their surviving systems to undamaged hulls, maintaining combat effectiveness even after sustaining damage that would cripple conventional warships. "They're learning from every engagement," Admiral Roberts observed, as she reviewed tactical reports showing human forces adapting to new Council weapons systems within hours of first encountering them. "Our people are treating this war as the greatest educational opportunity in human history." Each defeat taught humanity something new about alien technology and tactics, while Council forces continued to rely on doctrines that had worked for centuries against enemies who fought according to predictable patterns and conventional strategies. The fortress world of Irongate fell within 18 hours as its own defense. Systems completed their self-destruction under the influence of human viral programs, leaving the planet defenseless against occupation by forces that had seemed hopelessly outgunned just days earlier. Similar victories across multiple sectors marked the turning point, where human resistance evolved from desperate rebellion into systematic conquest of territories that the Council had considered absolutely secure against any possible threat. The tide of war had shifted in humanity's favor, not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through the application of tactical innovation and strategic thinking that alien civilizations couldn't comprehend or counter effectively. Reconstruction teams worked methodically through the wreckage of Prime Nexus, as the once mighty capital of the Galactic Council underwent transformation from symbol of alien dominance into headquarters of an entirely different kind of interstellar. Government High Counselor Vrath stood amid the debris of what had been the Grand Assembly Chamber, his mandibles clicking nervously as he watched human engineers directing the dismantling of systems that had maintained Council authority for over a millennium. Admiral Roberts materialized as a holographic projection in the cleared space where the Council's ceremonial throne had once dominated the chamber. Her image stable despite interference from ongoing nanite activity throughout the station's compromised systems. "I believe you requested these negotiations," she said without any of the formality or deference that had characterized human communications. With Council leadership throughout their centuries of servitude under alien rule around Vrath, the surviving representatives of what had been 12 proud species were reduced to 7 broken civilizations, whose military forces had been systematically destroyed by enemies they had never taken seriously enough to study or understand. 3. Entire species had changed sides after witnessing human military capabilities and deciding that cooperation offered better survival prospects than continued resistance against opponents who seemed to anticipate every strategic move. "What are your terms?" Vrath asked, his voice carrying none of the authority that had once commanded fleets capable of destroying entire star systems and enforcing galactic law across thousands of worlds. Roberts gestured toward holographic displays showing human medical teams working alongside alien survivors on devastated worlds, sharing advanced treatment technologies that had been developed during the conflict to heal injuries caused by both sides. "We want what we always wanted," she replied simply. "Equal representation in galactic government, fair access to resources and trade opportunities, and the basic right to exist without being treated as expendable labor or second-class citizens." The irony was obvious to everyone present. Humanity had fought the bloodiest war in galactic history to achieve goals that could have been accomplished through peaceful negotiation if the Council had been willing to treat them with basic dignity and respect. "And if we agree to these terms?" inquired Counselor Ilex of the Spiral Coalition, his multiple eyes focusing on engineering reports showing human technical teams helping to repair infrastructure that their own forces had systematically destroyed. Roberts smiled with genuine warmth rather than the grim satisfaction that had characterized her expressions during the military campaign, revealing the fundamental difference between human capacity for violence and their preferred approach to civilization. "Then we help rebuild everything that was damaged during this conflict," she said, activating displays showing human reconstruction. "Efforts already underway on dozens of worlds, and we ensure that no species will ever again face the kind of exploitation that forced us to resort to warfare." The negotiations established frameworks for a new interstellar government based on contribution and merit, rather than technological superiority or ancient privileges that had allowed some species to dominate others through accident of evolutionary development. Human representatives worked alongside former enemies to draft constitutional principles that would protect the rights of all sentient species, while preventing the concentration of power that had enabled the Council's abusive treatment of supposedly inferior civilizations. Dr. Patterson served on the committee responsible for establishing scientific exchange programs that would share advanced technologies freely among member species, rather than restricting access based on political considerations or military alliances. Her work with alien researchers had revealed that many Council species possessed capabilities that could benefit humanity. While human innovations in areas like nanoscale engineering and biological modification could revolutionize alien medicine and manufacturing, we're not trying to punish anyone, she explained to her hegemony counterparts as they worked together on projects that would have been impossible under the old system of species-based hierarchy and restricted technology transfer. The new interstellar alliance incorporated lessons learned from humanity's democratic traditions while adapting to the realities of governing civilizations that had evolved under completely different environmental and social conditions. Captain Rodriguez commanded one of the joint task forces responsible for hunting down pirate fleets and rogue military units that refused to accept the new galactic order. Working alongside former council officers who had adapted to human tactical doctrines, her mixed species crew demonstrated the practical benefits of cooperation between civilizations that had been enemies just months earlier, combining alien technology with human strategic thinking to achieve results that neither could have accomplished alone. It's strange how quickly former enemies can become trusted partners, she observed to her alien first officer as they planned operations against holdout factions that continued to raid civilian shipping and attack reconstruction efforts. The transformation wasn't universally welcomed, particularly among council species who had benefited most from the old system of exploitation, but resistance was limited by the practical reality that humanity had demonstrated overwhelming military superiority. Admiral Roberts established the Office of Species Protection to ensure that no civilization would face the systematic oppression that had driven humanity to war. With enforcement capabilities backed by the military forces that had proven capable of defeating any opposition, the new government structure reflected human understanding that peace required more than good intentions. It needed institutional safeguards and the credible threat of consequences for those who would abuse power or exploit weaker species. Reconstruction of Prime Nexus incorporated defensive systems designed by human military engineers who understood that the capital of an interstellar government needed protection against both external threats and internal rebellion. But the most significant changes were cultural rather than technological, as species throughout the galaxy adapted to the idea that advancement came through cooperation and mutual benefit, rather than domination of supposedly inferior civilizations. Educational exchange programs brought human students to alien worlds while sending young aliens to Earth universities, creating understanding between species that had viewed each other as natural enemies or master-servant relationships. Trade networks evolved to reflect the new reality that human industrial capacity and innovation made them valuable partners rather than expendable labor, with economic relationships based on mutual benefit rather than exploitation. The fortress worlds that had once protected council territory were converted into research stations and cultural centers where different species could work together on projects that benefited everyone. Rather than maintaining military dominance within 5 years of the war's end, the Interstellar Alliance had achieved levels of technological advancement and social cooperation that exceeded anything accomplished during the Council's millennium of rule through fear and oppression. Roberts often reflected on the strange truth that humanity had discovered during their transition from victims to protectors. Sometimes the most peaceful outcome required demonstrating the capacity for overwhelming violence against those who would abuse their power. The galaxy had found a new equilibrium based on mutual respect, enforced by the knowledge that humanity remained capable of defending the principles they had fought to establish, ensuring that the cycle of exploitation would never repeat itself. Children born after the war grew up in a universe where species cooperation was normal rather than exceptional, where technological advancement served all civilizations rather than privileging ancient hierarchies based on accidents of evolutionary development. The mining worlds where human workers had once labored as expendable servants became centers of innovation, where former slaves and masters worked together to develop resources for the benefit of all Alliance members rather than enriching a privileged few. Humanity had achieved their place among the stars not as conquerors seeking to replace one form of domination with another, but as guardians ensuring that the galaxy would remain safe for all species to pursue their own paths to advancement and fulfillment.